I was standing in the driveway when my phone buzzed. I had just watched my daughter's taillights disappear around the corner. She had a flight to catch. Early morning, back to Portland, back to her life. I was still holding my coffee mug, still in my house coat. The air was cold and for October in Georgia, the kind of cold that reminds you winter is coming, whether you're ready or not. The text was from Walter. Walter has been our handyman for 11 years. He's not young. Somewhere in his late 60s, bad knee, drives a white Ford pickup that sounds like it's arguing with itself every time he starts it. He's not a talker. He shows up, does the work, leaves. In 11 years, the man has never once texted me anything except on my way or done for today. So when I saw his name on my screen at 6:47 in the morning, I already knew something was wrong. Don't come back inside yet. Go sit in your car. I need to show you something. I stared at that message for a long time. Walter was supposed to be fixing the gutter on the back of the house. My son-in-law, Raymond, had said he'd take care of calling someone before the rains came, and he never did. So I called Walter myself 3 weeks ago. He'd come by twice already. This was his final morning to finish the job. I typed back, "Walter, what's going on?" 3 dots appeared. "Then, please, just go to your car. Lock the door." I listened. I don't know why exactly, but I listened. Maybe because Walter had never once been dramatic in 11 years. Maybe because something in the way he wrote those words, short, deliberate, no explanation, felt serious in a way I couldn't shake. I walked to my car in the driveway. I got in. I locked the door like he asked. And then I sat there in the cold with my coffee going lukewarm and tried to understand what in the world was happening inside my own home. I should tell you a little about my life before that morning, so you understand what I mean when I say I never saw it coming. My name is Ruth. I'm 63 years old. I was married for 31 years to a good man named Harold, and we lost him to a stroke 4 years ago. It was sudden. No warning, no long goodbye, just here one morning and gone by afternoon. Harold was the kind of man who fixed things without being asked and remembered the names of every neighbor on the block. When he died, I didn't know what to do with myself for about 2 years. My daughter, Cynthia, is 41. She lives in Portland with her husband, Raymond. They've been married for 8 years. No children by choice, which I respect. Raymond works in commercial real estate development, leasing, that kind of thing. He's always dressed well, always has something confident to say, always seems like the most comfortable person in any room. Harold never warmed to him, but Harold was polite. He would say to me privately, "That man smiles too fast." I thought Harold was just being protective of his daughter. I told him to give Raymond a chance. After Harold died, the finances got complicated. Harold had managed everything. Retirement accounts, the house mortgage. We were close to paid off, but not quite. A small investment portfolio he'd built quietly over the years. I knew the broad strokes, but not the details. I trusted Harold, and Harold took care of it. When he was gone, I had to learn fast. Cynthia stepped in to help, or so I thought. She offered to manage the accounts while I got on my feet. She said it was temporary. She had power of attorney. Harold and I had both granted it to her years ago. Standard estate planning. Our attorney suggested it. At the time, it felt responsible, thoughtful even. Within the first year after Harold's death, Cynthia and Raymond began talking about consolidating, moving accounts. Simplifying, they called it. Raymond had connections, he said. He knew people who could get better returns. I was grieving. I was tired. I said okay. I said okay to a lot of things that year that I shouldn't have. By the time that October morning arrived, I had started to notice things, small things, individually easy to explain away. A statement from one of Harold's old investment accounts that showed a balance significantly lower than I remembered. When I asked Cynthia, she said there had been fees, a reallocation. She'd explain it later. She never did. A phone call from my bank about a wire transfer I hadn't authorized. When I called back and pressed, the representative said the transaction had been approved by someone with authorized account access. I mentioned it to Cynthia. She said it must have been her moving funds between accounts to avoid a fee. She seemed irritated that I'd questioned it. A conversation I overheard one evening when Cynthia and Raymond were visiting and thought I was upstairs. Raymond said something like, "By spring it'll be clean, she won't even notice." I came downstairs and asked what they were talking about. Cynthia said the bathroom tile renovation they were planning for their Portland condo. I smiled and said that sounded nice. But I didn't sleep that night. I hadn't said anything to anyone because what would I say? She's my daughter. I raised her, I changed her diapers and drove her to piano lessons and held her when her first boyfriend broke her heart at 17. You don't accuse your daughter of stealing from you based on a sentence you half heard from across a hallway, but I had started writing things down. Dates, account numbers, balances I remembered, things that didn't add up. I kept the notebook in a shoebox on the top shelf of my closet under Harold's old cardigan. I hadn't told a soul. When Walter knocked on my car window, I startled so hard I spilled the rest of my coffee. He was standing in the driveway with his cap in his hands. That's how I knew it was serious. Walter always wears his cap. Always. I have never seen him without it, except at Harold's funeral. I rolled the window down. "Ruth," he said, "I'm sorry to do this to you, but I don't think I can in good conscience not tell you." He pulled out his phone. It was an older Android, the screen a little cracked in one corner. He had a video pulled up. "Yesterday," he said, "I was up on the ladder on the back side of the house, working on that corner gutter, the one that feeds into the downspout, and I could see through the window into your home office. I wasn't trying to look. But the blinds were open, and what I saw," he stopped. "Raymond was in there. He had your filing cabinet open. He was photographing documents with his phone. I felt very still. You and Cynthia had gone to the grocery store," Walter said. "I saw your leave. I assumed he went with you. But he didn't. He stayed behind." He turned the phone toward me. The video was shaky, taken at an angle from above, through a window, but you could see it clearly. Raymond, in my home office, in front of the open filing cabinet I keep Harold's estate documents in, holding his phone over a folder, photographing page after page. I watched it twice. "I didn't know what to do," Walter said. "I sat on it last night. I almost didn't say anything, but I kept thinking about Harold. Harold was a good man, and I just couldn't." I thanked him. My voice was very steady, which surprised me because my hands were shaking. I asked Walter to go back and finish the gutter like nothing had happened. I needed him outside on the property in case I needed a witness. He nodded and went. I sat in my car for another 40 minutes. I thought about the wire transfer, the investment account, the conversation I'd overheard, the way Raymond always offered to help me organize things when they visited, the way Cynthia had started referring to the house, my house, Harold's, and my house, as the property in recent months, casually, like it was already becoming something transactional in her mind. I thought about what a forensic accountant would cost. I thought about the attorney who'd done our estate planning, a kind woman in Buckhead named Helen Archer, who had known Harold for years. I thought about whether I had enough in my personal checking account to pay for a consultation without triggering any alerts on the joint account Cynthia still had access to. I did not cry. I think I was too angry to cry. I pulled up my contacts and called Helen's office. It was not yet 8 in the morning. I got voicemail. I left a message that said I needed an urgent appointment and that was sensitive and could she please call me back on my cell and not the house line. Then I went inside. Raymond was in the kitchen making eggs. Cynthia was at the table with her laptop. They both looked up and said good morning. I said good morning back. I said I was a little cold from standing in the driveway and was going to take a warm shower. Cynthia said she and Raymond's flight was at 2 and they'd probably leave for the airport around 11. I said that sounded fine. I took the longest shower of my life, standing under hot water, letting it run. Helen called me back at 9:15. I was in my bedroom with the door closed and the television on low. I told her everything. The power of attorney, the accounts, the wire transfer, the video Walter had taken, the notebook and the shoebox. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Ruth, don't touch the accounts. Don't move anything. Don't say anything to them. Do you feel physically safe?" I said I did. She said, "I want you to take that notebook and photograph every page with your phone and email the images to me right now while we're on the phone. Can you do that?" I could. I did. She said she was going to contact a colleague who handled elder financial abuse cases. She said what I was describing, if it held up, was potentially wire fraud, misuse of power of attorney, and possibly elder financial abuse under Georgia statute. She said the civil and criminal implications were significant. I hadn't thought of the word abuse before. I sat on the edge of my bed with that word for a moment. "I know this is your daughter," Helen said quietly. "I know." I said I know too. I watched Raymond load their suitcases into the rental car at 11:20. He had that easy stride, that comfortable way of moving through the world like it all belongs to him a little. Cynthia hugged me at the door. She smelled like the same perfume she's worn since college, and for a second, just a second, she was 20 again, and I was dropping her off at her dorm and waving from the parking lot. Then she pulled back, smiled at me, and said, "We'll call you when we land, Mom." I said, "Okay." I stood on the porch and watched them drive away. Walter's truck was still in the back. I walked around the side of the house and told him they were gone. He took his cap off and held it to his chest like he was at a graveside. "You okay?" he asked. "No," I said honestly, "but I'm going to be." What happened over the next 6 weeks was not the kind of thing I had the energy to follow in real time. Helen moved fast. Her colleague, a civil attorney named Boyd, who specialized exactly in this area, was even faster. The forensic accounting alone took 2 weeks. What they found was worse than I had feared, though perhaps not as bad as it could have been. Over the previous 3 years, Cynthia and Raymond, primarily Raymond, initiating with Cynthia's knowledge and signature on several documents, had moved approximately $214,000 out of Harold's estate accounts. Some of it was routed through a shell LLC Raymond had formed in Delaware. Some of it was moved in small enough increments to avoid triggering automatic bank flags. They had done this carefully. What they had not counted on was Walter standing on a ladder at the right moment. What they had also not counted on was me. I had more documentation than I realized. The shoebox notebook, Harold's original estate inventory, which I had kept a copy of separately from the filing cabinet, tucked in the back of a recipe binder in the kitchen. 11 months of bank statements I'd been quietly printing and mailing to my sister in Tennessee for safekeeping, starting the night after the conversation I'd overheard. Because something in me knew. Helen said that when she presented the evidence package to Raymond's attorney, there was very little room to negotiate. Raymond and Cynthia hired separate attorneys shortly after that. The settlement agreement required full restitution, all $214,000 returned, plus legal fees, plus interest. Raymond's Delaware LLC was dissolved. The power of attorney was formally revoked. Because of the restitution agreement, criminal charges were not pursued, though Boyd made clear to their attorneys that the documentation was preserved and any future action would be met differently. Cynthia called me once during that period. I let it go to voicemail. She said she was sorry. She said Raymond had pushed her into it, that she hadn't understood the full scope, that she'd been trying to protect me from knowing how much the estate had actually lost in Harold's final years. She cried on the voicemail. I listened to it 3 times. I wanted to understand whether I believed her. I still don't know. What I know is that Harold spent 31 years of his life building something for us, For her too, because she was ours, and that something was used carefully and deliberately while I was grieving the man who made it. I know that the person who stopped it was a 67-year-old man with a bad knee and a cracked phone screen who fixed gutters and kept his word and thought about what Harold would have wanted. Walter finished that last gutter on the back of the house the same morning all of this started. I paid him for the job when everything was done. He tried to waive off any extra, but I insisted. He said, "I just did what was right." I said, "That's the whole thing, Walter. That's the whole thing." The restitution funds arrived by December. I moved them into a new account, mine alone, in my name, with no authorized users except Helen, in a formal legal capacity. I updated my estate documents. I changed the locks, which felt both practical and symbolic. I still live in the house Harold and I built our life in. I still have his cardigan on the top shelf of the closet. The shoebox is still there too, because I think I need to see it sometimes. I need to remember that I did not imagine things, that I noticed, that I kept records, that when a quiet man knocked on my car window and took off his hat and told me the truth, I believed him. Some mornings I sit in the kitchen with my coffee and the house is very still, and I think about the kind of loneliness that comes from realizing the danger was never outside the walls. It was always at the breakfast table, but I'm still here. The coffee is hot, the gutters are clean, and for the first time in a long time, everything in this house belongs entirely to me. I keep coming back to one small moment. Walter standing in my driveway with his cap in his hands. 11 years of showing up, doing the work, and leaving, and then one morning doing the harder thing instead. He could have finished the gutter and gone home. He almost did. He told me later he sat on it all night, but he didn't let it go. And that decision, made quietly, without fanfare, without any expectation of reward, is the reason I still have what Harold and I spent a lifetime building. That's the part I think about most. Not Raymond's spreadsheets or the Delaware LLC or the wire transfers that came in just under the threshold to avoid flags. Those things are cold and calculated and say everything about who he is. What I think about is Walter, because what he did wasn't complicated. It was just right. And doing what's right when it costs you something, when it's uncomfortable, when it's none of your business, when you could just look away. That's the whole test of a person's character. Walter passed it. My own daughter didn't. I don't say that lightly. Cynthia is still my daughter. I carried her. I know the sound of her laugh, and the way she bites her bottom lip when she's nervous, and every version of her from infant to adult. Love like that doesn't switch off because of a betrayal. But I've had to be honest with myself about what happened, and being honest required me to stop making excuses. She knew. Whatever she says on that voicemail about Raymond pushing her, she signed documents. She had access to the accounts. She was there. What I've learned is that grief makes you vulnerable in ways you don't always recognize while they're happening. When Harold died, I needed help, and I accepted it from the person I trusted most. That was not foolish. That was human. What was foolish was letting grief become passivity. Letting "I don't understand all of this" become "someone else will handle it." The moment I stopped paying attention to my own life, I created a space that someone filled with theft. So I made a choice, somewhere around the 3rd week after Harold was gone, to start writing things down. I didn't know what I was collecting. I just knew something felt wrong, and I didn't want to forget the details. That notebook, those dates and balances and overheard sentences, turned out to be the thing that protected me. Not a lawyer, not a bank, not a system, me. My own stubborn refusal to fully surrender my awareness, even when I was exhausted and heartbroken. There's something in that worth sitting with. The people who took from me were smart, they were organized, they planned across years, but they assumed I was not paying attention. They assumed grief had made me someone who could be managed. they were wrong. Not because I'm exceptional, but because I refuse to stop thinking. That matters. Staying sharp when life gives you every reason to go numb. That's not easy. But it's the only real protection any of us has. I'm 63 years old and I live alone in a house full of quiet. Some days that's hard. Most days now, it's enough. The gutters are clean. The accounts are mine. And I know, in a way I didn't before, exactly what I'm made of.